Hello and welcome again to Sport Unlocked, the podcast digesting the week's sports news, the comprehensive overview of the issues behind the sports headlines. I'm Rob Harris from the Associated Press. Alongside me as ever, Martin Ziegler from The Times, Tariq Panja from the New York Times. We're all face-to-face this week, but they'll have to tantalisingly wait some of that news from that face-to-face meeting.
Yeah, it's great to catch up, guys. We've had a remarkable week in sports news, mainly around this sort of craziness which has emerged over the Novak Djokovic thing. Which, I mean, even when we talked about it a week ago, at the time it seemed sort of slightly outlandish, but the developments since then have just been it's gone from one remarkable revelation to another.
And we've got a great guest joining us later to give us the inside track from the world of tennis. Matt Gentry is Andy Murray's agent, is also the co-founder of 77 Sports Management, and he's on the ground in Melbourne to speak to us. Also coming up, we're going to delve deeper into Manchester City's annual financial report, which has been published this week. Then news from American authorities of a doping prosecution linked to the Tokyo Olympics. And we'll pay tribute and reflect on the life of Andrew Jennings, the journalist who helped to uncover so much corruption in the world of sports. There's a look at his combative and complicated journalism as he battled with the sports chiefs. Thank you to everyone who's been getting in touch about our nomination in the Sports Podcast Awards. You can vote for us if you're enjoying listening to us. The link is on our Twitter feed. That's just at Sport Unlocked. And we're really grateful for your support if you can go through those steps of logging in and voting for us. And you can always send us your feedback, anything about the pod, at Sport Unlocked on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And guys, it's been a week where we've been watching a bit of the African Cup of Nations from afar. And as ever, it's not been quiet, has it?
It's been a difficult start for that tournament that's been played in Cameroon. The home team, Cameroon, are the only side that scored more than one goal in their matches. Now we're in the second round. That hasn't been good for the spectacle. It's been a bit of a binary code of results, 1-1, 1-0, 0-0. It's been a bit like that, but there's been a few high-profile snafus as well.
I would say on the binary results, for a bit of context, let's remember England's run to the Euro 2020 final, their group stage, 3 games they played, only 2 goals scored by England. 1-0, 0-0 and 1-0. So
yeah, absolutely. But this is a tournament full of those England teams by the looks of it. Let's hope for a bit more entertainment. We got Cameroon scored 4 against Ethiopia in their second game. Let's hope we'll see a bit more. But in terms of the snafus, there have been some weird things that have taken place. There was a game between Mali and Tunisia. Mali were leading 1-0 with 85 minutes gone, and the referee blew for full time in that match. The Tunisians obviously were furious, but the game had ended. And a press conference even took place. And suddenly the players were asked to go back onto the field. The Tunisian players didn't return to the game after that. And there is an inquiry into that, as there is an inquiry into scenes at Mauritania's game against Gambia, where the wrong national anthem was played not once, not twice, but 3 times. That led to an apology to the Mauritanian people and the Mauritanian president from CAF's president. But onward and upward, there's still plenty of time for the tournament to spark into life and for some of these unforced errors to be consigned to the past.
Yeah, the referee in that match was Yanni Sakazwi from Zambia. Actually, the CAF looked into it and then said that the result would stand. They used a sort of slightly strange phrase that the result has been homologated, which I've never heard anyone use that word. So, but anyway,
do we know what it
it's
means?
been homologated and approved.
I sort of just assumed it must be right because they'd used it so unusual.
No, it is right. It means approved, but I homologate you, Tariq, on a regular basis.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
I just don't get why the VAR didn't intervene. We're so often used to hearing from them. Why?
Or the fourth official, whose job probably is to just keep an eye on what's happening in the game. But it was that, that international sign of people whacking their fingers on their wrist. All these Tunisians but bounding onto the field. Crazy scenes. But the sad thing is it's not a good look for CAF or for African football, which, there was a lot of criticism of the tournament taking place as well. Honestly, I hope this is just like first week nerves or whatever. We consign this to the past.
I mean, it's not just CAF. I mean, I don't know if you remember, the same thing happened in La Liga last season. Seville Granada blew a minute too early. Players all went into the dressing room, and they all had to come back out and play 4 minutes more, despite the fact the referee had sent them to the dressing room. So it does happen even in the top leagues.
And there, to be a little bit of context here, Osasu, who we've had on here, Nigerian journalist, he's suggested that the referee had a medical episode during the game, and that's why. What that episode was and what that is, we still got no idea. But he had something went wrong clearly. It doesn't look like he'll be refereeing any more games in this tournament, though.
When talking to CAF people, I did, reflect on how actually it was an English referee, Graham Poll, who managed to show 3 yellow cards in the same World Cup game in 2006.
All right, name the game. Quiz question. All right, 3, 2.
Croatia?
Croatia, Australia.
Well done, Rob. Impressive. Who was a player who got the 3 yellows?
Funny enough, I think it might have been the guy who was born in Australia. Was it Simunic?
I think it was Simunic, you're right.
This is the frantic Googling at the moment. Do we have some intermission music that can play? Yes, it is. Simunic, who was shown the 3 yellow cards.
A bit of a nerd. One of my favourite World Cups.
Perfect for a pub quiz or a Downing Street quiz, maybe. But without a suitcase of booze, we can assure you that has been wheeled in for this recording. Not much partying for Novak Djokovic at the moment in Australia as we record. He's awaiting deportation after having his visa revoked for a second time. And this really has been a saga of Novak Djokovic's own digital footprint in some cases, exposing his deceptions, his lack of candor over his visa application to Australia. And if we step back, let's look at all the issues relating to this. We've got the positive test that might not have been a positive test from Serbia. When did he know he tested positive? Why did he spend time with the L'Equipe journalist in the days after discovering his positive test? Why did he go to Spain when he was still in that isolation period? And why did he then not declare on his forms when he entered Australia that he'd been in a country other than Serbia in the 2 weeks before arriving? And we had his initial hearing that went his way when he was granted his visa. Then the executive power of the Australian immigration minister meant that Djokovic had his visa revoked.
Yeah, incredible stuff. I mean, I think the most incredible thing about this is that, I mean, it looks as though the Serbian health ministry is sort of colluded with this, because when somebody scanned the QR code from his apparently positive test, it took you to the Serbian Health Ministry website, and that came up negative. Half an hour later, same thing happened, and it came up positive. So, I mean, he is obviously a massive figure in Serbia, and it does look like people are bending over backwards to help him there. But the whole thing's ridiculous. Yes, you test positive, yet then you go and mingle with lots of people, including a journalist, for an interview. You say you haven't been to Spain, and then you've gone to Spain. I mean, not surprisingly, given that there's an election coming up in Australia, the immigration minister has said, no, that's it, visa revoked, at least until the next court case.
The thing that struck me was the reaction to the leaked off-air talks between these 2 Australian news presenters in the middle of this, in which they call Novak Djokovic a lying, sneaky so-and-so, among other things. They're discussing this case. But the reaction to that from the Australian people is they'd like to nominate these people for Australians of the Year. So that's the sense you get from over there. And I think we might even have some of the audio, Rob.
Of course, there's absolutely no audio like this from the recording of the pod. Nothing that we do chat about that doesn't make the final edit, of course. They have just been in the unfortunate position of having their sort of candid conversation let out into the public. But as we said, a lot of people would stand by what they're saying.
Yeah, we know the Aussies are the majority of them are absolutely furious about the whole Djokovic situation, that he was allowed in unvaccinated. Yeah, but we've got some great insight into what the actual people involved in the Australian Open, what they think of all this coming up now, haven't we?
Yeah, we can bring in from Australia Matt Gentry. He's the agent to Andy Murray. He's been out in Australia, the thick of it, in the midst of all the preparations for the Australian Open, and actually enjoying a successful time with Andy Murray, who reached his first final at an ATP Tour event in 3 years on his comeback from injury. Matt, welcome to Sport Unlocked.
Oh, thank you for having me. Apologies in advance. Voice is a little bit croaky, so I'll do my best.
Is that from cheering on Andy this week, Matt?
Yeah. Hopefully it's not coronavirus, but no, I've been tested, so all is good on that front. So,
what's it been like being inside the world of tennis and in Australia at the time of this Djokovic saga unfolding, and quite unprecedented for tennis?
Yeah, I mean it's crazy, isn't it? You sort of look, across the globe, it's sort of front page news everywhere, isn't it? Really, I mean, I'm not sure it's necessarily the best look for tennis, but it's undoubtedly sort of everyone wants to sort of know what's going to happen. It's not a great look, and I don't know. I don't think Novak's come out of it particularly well, really. I think that the strength of the feeling in Australia here, especially among the residents, was, I think it sort of feels that overwhelmingly they weren't that keen for him to play. It'd have been interesting in reception he would have got stepping out on court.
What is actually the general sentiment there in Melbourne? We're speaking days ahead of the Australian Open starting. Is there support for the Australian government decision to actually revoke this visa? People in the world of tennis having viewed all the confusion, all the the way Djokovic has actually potentially misled people. Is there actually support, or is there still some sympathy towards Djokovic?
I think there was probably sympathy around when he was first detained, and I think I don't think the government necessarily followed the correct procedure around it. The longer it's dragged on, I think, and I'm only going by sort of what I'm reading, local news, and but it feels like there's overriding people didn't want him there. It's interesting. I think the elections here are sort of 2-3 months away, so it feels like a very political decision, politically motivated, and they need to be sort of immigration wise they're fairly strict anyway. They're sort of well known for that globally. So it's sort of. But I think the frustration is generally it's dragged on for far too long. It feels like they could have tried to deal with this a bit quicker than it has, and if it spills over to it before the tournament starts, then I think players start getting frustrated because it's they should be there playing. It should be about the tennis, not about an individual and an issue with the government. I just don't think it's a good look for the sport. For no one really comes out of it well, I don't think.
Matt, in terms of one of the things with Djokovic since the first since he was out of that hotel, the deportation hotel, the details that have come out is he's accidentally filled the form wrong. He's decided to do an interview while having coronavirus, according to himself, which he regrets. What kind of advice do players get around things like this, especially around coronavirus? Is that something that's right at the top, especially like in your case with Andy, given that the world that we're in and the travel plus the profile, what is it quite front and centre?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's up to each player really, I suppose, on their sort of disposition towards vaccinations. I mean, I can only speak for Andy, who was very pro-vaccination and was almost sort of semi-excited getting his jabs. But he sort of very much believed that he had as a sort of role model and was there to actually not only keep him safe but everyone else safe, and actually felt like it was a sort of part of a duty almost. So he was there was no sort of extra motivation or anything for him. He was more than happy to do it. So. The tours do a good job. I think they're sort of encouraging players and making it as easy as they can do to get vaccinated. They had vaccinations at most of the tournaments, I think, last year. So it wasn't that there was sort of not an opportunity to do it. And I think by and large, I think sort of 97% of the tour now on the male side are vaccinated, and I think probably similar number on the female side as well. So it's pretty good, I think, if you compare that to other sports.
Matt, what's the feeling like towards Djokovic from the other players who've come out for the Australian Open? I mean, it seemed to me a sense of maybe a bit of sympathy initially, if he'd sort of turned up, but that seems to have dissipated. That's just like looking from the outside, but from the inside, just tell me what's the feeling?
It feels like it's overshadowed the sort of run up to the tournament, and it's so you would forgive players for feeling a little annoyed, I guess, at everything being about Novak and vaccinations versus the lead up to one of the big slams, and something players look forward to and have been sort of working hard towards. So it doesn't feel like it's although he's had his visa revoked for a second time, it sort of still feels like there's more to come from it, really, doesn't it? Which it shouldn't really overshadow the tennis.
One of the things has been about Novak claiming he obviously didn't fill in the form that he ended up not saying he'd been in Spain in the previous 2 weeks in another country. Does Andy always fill in his forms? Do all your players fill in the forms?
I mean, they don't, and I don't know. It's probably not reasonable to expect some of the elite level athletes to be doing, because there are lots of forms, by the way, and the slight sort of difficulty in around it is actually the rules and regulations have been changing sort of week in, week out. And because of the global nature of the tour, you're sort of coming into different countries and you're sort of governed by their local laws and their regulations. So it's not been easy. But yeah, I would say players probably aren't filling out their own forms. It'll be someone within their team doing it on their behalf. And I don't think the form filling is necessarily the bit that obviously it's it's a mistake and it's an error. I think the bigger issues are around possibly turning up to a keep photo shoot and doing interviews with there was quite a few people apparently on that shoot while he was positive, which is not great.
Matt, there was a World Cup qualifier in South America between Brazil and Argentina a couple of months ago, and it was about, I think, 10 minutes old when the health inspector stormed onto the field and stopped the match because 3 of the Argentine players had incorrect documentation and the match was cancelled. Now, this Novak Djokovic thing, like you said, he can appeal. And from what I've read this morning, it says this could be stopped mid-tournament. I mean, what if you're arranging a tennis tournament? What would you do if you were Tennis Australia? Do you try and stop this now, one way or the other, or do you have a Brazil? It's a 30-40 second set, and then he's hauled off. I mean, what does that look like?
Yeah, blimey, I'm not quite sure you'd be wanting that sort of mid match. I mean, again, Tennis Australia, want the best players at the tournament, right? I mean, he's won the thing 9 times, so they want to try and get him on there and do it if they can. I can sort of understand it if you're just looking at it from a tournament perspective and running a tournament. It's sort of comparable football wise. It's like having a Messi there or Ronaldo, isn't it? You want the best players there, but then you run into that conflict, obviously, with the laws of the land. It's just I guess what they would have wanted is a resolution straight away and something clean that was done or dusted, right at the outset. I don't think anyone wants this to go on. It just is a bad look for everyone, really, isn't it? I think the longer this goes on.
And for Britain, we've got Nigel Farage out in Serbia. I saw Andy tweeted him as well. What was that about?
It was. I quite enjoyed that tweet. I thought it was quite good, and I'm not sure how many people picked up on the sort of fishing rod after, where he was sort of intimating that he was reeling him in, but also maybe a little jibe at Nigel's sort of fisheries and his sort of fishing quotas that he was talking about as well. But that's that. I mean, that's good fun, I think, really, isn't it? I think the vast majority of people quite enjoyed that as well. Apart from Nigel himself, who took it a bit too seriously.
Are those the type of things you have a chat with Andy about when you sort of weigh up, do I post this, or does he just go and do it?
I think in years gone by with athletes, I think early on, with Andy now, he's been around the block for so long, he's probably made a few mistakes along the way, but he's quite a sensible person, he's quite smart, so he sort of has a feel for, he's authentic. So ultimately he'll sort of do what he wants anyway, right? And I think, if you're really sort of trying to sort of clamp down and tell someone what to do, I think that can sometimes backfire. But, I think with all our athletes, it's just, you just offer guidance, right? You sort of say, look, if you do this, then this might happen, or, but you don't necessarily want to sort of stop them doing anything. I think, years gone by, it was all about athletes, being rather vanilla and not having a view on anything for fear of, upsetting sponsors, where I think actually nowadays it appears, athletes have a view on things, right? And there's sort of social conscience. And I think people have come around to respect that.
Do you actually find it's more appealing to sponsors now at times? The fact actually if players seem to actually stand for something a bit more than just the boring, bland public personas?
Yeah, I think almost sponsors demand it now. And I think it's, when you're talking to sponsors, I think, your player having an opinion on something is powerful. And it's sort of, this social mobility, social change, I think is really important, and it helps. So I think definitely that is the case more and more.
Yeah, I bet someone like Andy's obviously had sound quite interesting many times over the years, whereas some footballers has been quite boring. But now, only recently have the footballers started to speak up a bit more.
Well, it's quite tough sometimes, because you see athletes and people sort of have perceptions of athletes based on a press conference, or for footballers just after a match or whatever. So it's quite hard to sort of almost convey a personality or have an opinion on something after you've just been on court for 3 hours sort of sweating, and you might have lost, and so you might not be sort of up for it. So I think the more you can sort of reveal about people, the better, really. It's
Yeah, but you're lucky that you've got a client in Andy. As you said, he's so interesting. He was interesting before, as Rob was trying to say, before you needed to be interesting with politics or views on life, etc. He's always been quite punchy, and now, as you're saying, sponsors want punch. He's sort of ahead of his time in some way, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I think and he also doesn't really. He doesn't really say offensive things on there, but I don't think he minds if people disagree with his opinion. I don't think he minds necessarily upsetting people. Not upsetting people, because he wouldn't sort of go out his way to do it. But he doesn't. It sounds strong, but he doesn't necessarily care an awful lot about his opinion, his belief. And actually, if you like it, great. If you don't, then okay, that's fine. You can disagree with it. He's not necessarily that sort of hung up on sort of or particularly sensitive if people disagree with him and give him a bit of grief for it.
Now, Andy's competing at the Australian Open 3 years after they prematurely bid farewell to him, which would be quite funny. I mean, do you find it incredible, obviously, the fact back playing there, the fact he's still going?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible that he's playing, top-level sport with a metal hip, really. So, I mean, it's, that in itself is... but actually, it feels like he's sort of getting, back to, close to sort of where he was. I mean, it'll be interesting this year if he can sort of train solidly, and actually, because the difficulty the last few years is he's been sort of be able to play and then have to stop and play and then rest and not been able to train properly and put tournaments together back to back. So if he can do that this year, then there's no reason why he can't get himself right back in sort of the rankings, really. And I think the goal for him would be to be seeded at the big tournaments. So that way, then you get the sort of first sort of 2 or 3 rounds potentially will be easier. And then, I think, if he can get to the sort of second week of slams, especially Wimbledon, where he's naturally a good grass court player, then who knows? And
he could still go on for many years playing.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the thing. It's just being selective, I guess, and just managing. He may have a different opinion on it, but I think if he can play for another sort of 2 years, 3 years, maybe, then amazing, And that's, back in 2019 when, he was almost sort of, thinking about retirement, it almost feels like he's got a second chance. So he's almost had a look at what life as a retired athlete might look like, and then sort of been brought back. So I think that adds to the, he's sort of cherishing what he's got.
And Andy, working with you at 77 Management, not only on mentoring the next generation of tennis players, but also footballers too.
We set the agency up a few years ago, and it was partially driven by, he'd been with a few different agents prior to me, not me, I'm not included in this group, thankfully, where, he felt that actually it was all about the money and the athlete. They talk sort of a good game, but the athlete wasn't put first. And, he said, look, let's set something up, and I can, pass on, some sort of, whether it's advice around sport performance, whether it's, dealing with pressure or the media. He freely admits he's made lots of mistakes along the way, and actually didn't have that person in his life when he was younger, or his family had people to sort of ask about things, and therefore they made lots of mistakes. So he said, look, if we can help eradicate that and make the journey smoother and quicker for, talented young, Brits coming through, then I'd love to be part of that. And especially when he finishes playing, they'll have a bit more time to do. But our athletes are always sort of messaging him, and we have sort of WhatsApp chat groups with all the different athletes. So they're sort of constantly sort of putting stuff in there, and he's going back, and he'll speak to them. So I think he quite likes that sort of almost older brother type, role I guess he plays.
Matt, as sponsors are asking athletes to sell more and more new, sometimes esoteric products, what's the thoughts around crypto? Because in football, it seems like this industry is running amok through the world of football. Every team has an NFT. John Terry's hawking some type of ape. Like what are you guys into that? And is there a need for greater understanding? Because suddenly this thing has arrived.
It does feel it's come pretty quickly and without much regulation. So it's always to sort of beware a little bit with it. So I think you have to be careful, and especially when you have individual athletes versus teams, because it becomes all about that person. So it's all of, if Andy were to back a cryptocurrency and it were to fail, then it's Andy, right? Versus, it's a club where, so it sort of maybe dissipates it a little bit. I mean, we're relatively sort of into the sort of NFT space. We did a drop last year with a platform called We Knew and Wimbledon around that. So that was sort of dipping our toe in the water just to understand it a bit better. Andy's quite into his art as well, so it feels quite authentic to do it. So I think, we're definitely looking at that space, but just sort of treading carefully. I think that's the best way to go. So at least so you understand it a bit, and but we're always wary, especially around crypto. I just think, where there's the potential for, fans or whoever to get involved and maybe lose money, or it just doesn't feel right, really. I mean, you could sort of maybe look at it around a sort of financial education piece, where it's actually an introduction to crypto and trying to, but, as you say, there's a whole sort of, it's a big area that is unregulated right now. So I think it's one, but maybe not for the immediate future.
Is it also sort of treading carefully, particularly when playing in these golf tournaments? We've seen particularly Lewis Hamilton speaking out about human rights and things like that in the likes of Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Is that something you're having to sort of weigh up as well? How do you sort of communicate around that? Have you got Amnesty and human rights groups often contacting you, trying to get Andy to say something? And how do you respond?
Yeah, I mean, he's actually charitable partners. Why we do stuff with UNICEF and WWF. So UNICEF a little bit, I guess. I mean, look, he's turned down stuff in Saudi, and I don't think he would play there, to be honest, just because of what's going on. I think the tour's relatively established. I'm just trying to think Middle East wise. They do stuff in Qatar. There's tournaments that are held there. It's a bit. I mean, look, I think if he feels strongly about something, regardless, he will. He's at the stage where he'll happily call it out, and he'll have that debate with people. So I don't think he's scared to sort of voice his opinion on it.
What's he turned down in Saudi Arabia?
Just exhibition matches. So they've done a few over the years where they pay eye-watering sums of money to get players to come over, and I just think he wasn't interested.
What are we talking about? This is a thing with when, like, to ballpark wise, what's a normal exhibition? Say, I wanted to host one in another country, and I'd pay what, and what would Saudi be paying?
So it sort of depends on what the players request. If it's just turning up and playing a match, I think you could, if you're a number one player in the world or a former number one player in the world, in the Middle East, you could potentially, earn $1-2 million for an exhibition match. So yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, golf is similar. I mean, this is for the sort of top players, the sort of big global names. And I think golf is probably pretty similar in that respect.
Is it the equivalent of Elton John at a billionaire's birthday party? Is that what that's the
yeah. I don't think that's too far.
Yeah. Wow.
Incredible.
Yeah.
As we start a new calendar year in the world of tennis, what's right, what's wrong, what works in the world of tennis on the tour?
I could be here all night with this question. I think, I mean, good things with the tour. I think, it's great that it's a sport, it's a global sport, that men and women have equal prize money at the big events. There's lots to celebrate about it. It's quite fractured. You've got the 4 Grand Slams who sort of do their own thing. You've got, the ATP, WTA, the ITF. You've got the national federations. So there's lots of bodies all with their own sort of agendas. You've got, various sports companies that own different tournaments. So there's lots of sort of conflicts going on. So it's quite a complex place, and it's quite difficult to get decisions done. I think, I don't know if you've read about the Netflix documentary that could be interesting. So it's the same guy, Box to Box, who have done the F1 Drive to Survive, and they're going to look at doing it. So filming this year for next year for tennis. And I think that will be a great thing for the sport, actually. It will definitely help bring on the sort of next generation of younger players who, probably have been overshadowed over the last sort of 10 years or longer, just through, Roger Rafa and Novak winning everything, really. So I think, the chance of people to sort of get to know them and, know a bit about personalities and things will be good. And I just think it'd be good for the world of sport of tennis. I mean, I think, the tennis fan, they're competing now with so many sports and, things like gaming and, Netflix and the streaming platforms. I think they just need to do something to lower the average age of the fan. They need to be sort of seen to be, a bit more inclusive, maybe. But I think, so I think that would be a step in the right direction. I think that would be interesting, the Netflix documentary.
Thanks for your insight, and I hope all goes well for you, your players, particularly Andy, out at the Australian Open.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, guys. No, it's nice. And I've not actually listened to the podcast before, so I've made it now. I'm going to download it and start listening. So
brilliant advice for everyone. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. Matt Gentry, the agent for Andy Murray, co-founder of 77 Sports Management. Martin, Tarek, well, that was an interesting bit of news there from Matt, particularly over Andy Murray not going to Saudi Arabia and rejecting those offers to play in the exhibition matches, which, we've heard reservations from some athletes, some sports stars like Lewis Hamilton about driving in Saudi Arabia. Some might say, well, Andy Murray competes in other Gulf events on the tennis tour, but you don't really have a choice about those events in terms of the fact they're placed on the tour. Like Lewis Hamilton has the Saudi, the Qatari, and the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix put on the F1 calendar, and if it doesn't go, it would be detrimental to his hopes of a world title. But what we're seeing with Matt saying about Andy Murray is it's those additional lucrative offers that come in to play something like an exhibition match or two in Saudi Arabia that he chooses on morality grounds not to take part in.
Yeah, really fascinating. Not entirely surprising to me, but fascinating how much money they can make from these exhibition matches, and also, interesting to get confirmation that Murray's had these offers and turned them down.
Because this has been a week when we've seen football teams, we've seen Spanish teams out in Saudi Arabia. They've taken the cash, the Spanish Federation, for the 4-team Super Cup to take place there. There has been some unease, though, about that, hasn't there?
Yeah, Raul Garcia, the Athletic Bilbao captain, he spoke up against it. He said it doesn't make a lot of sense being there. This tournament should and could be played in their own country in front of their own fans. It doesn't make any sense, like I said, to be played in Saudi Arabia. And he said football has changed in the sense no one is thinking about fans. What matters is generating, money, getting sponsors, and forgetting the basics. That said, that horse bolted quite a long time ago. The idea that football isn't about money and this question about fans is something that we've been asking on this podcast as well. There is this tension, right, Martin, between the match-going fans in a local area and the millions who buy TV rights and buy shirts overseas.
Yeah, of course. I mean, clubs, as more and more the clubs, they're prioritising income, money, whatever the source. So, and that absolutely goes directly against the match-going fans. On the other hand, as we've also seen, those match-going fans, lots of them, if it means more success for their clubs, they're happy to accept anything.
And there's a real sense that just sports relations with Saudi Arabia are being normalised. Maybe some people think, well, we've addressed human rights issues. What more is there to say? And then we have Barcelona playing Real Madrid, first Clásico in Saudi Arabia, Athletic Bilbao against Atletico Madrid, and not really much interest from Spanish media out there in terms of writing about human rights. We did have Amnesty asking the clubs to show some form of solidarity in terms of women's rights, which are not equal still in Saudi Arabia. But that's what Saudi Arabia probably hopes for, sort of disinterest and a belief by some that, well, what more is there to say?
Yeah, I think we've seen that elsewhere as well. I can't think of an event that's been cancelled on human rights grounds when it comes to sports. Sports, as Martin alluded to, is open to the highest bidder, and the caravan just rolls on. And you talked about the fans. Buy us a new player, buy us a new centre forward. Well, when you point out where that money's coming from, that kind of loses its potency when this new player is.
And even an assist from FIFA as well, becoming what looked like an extension of Saudi government PR. A year ago, we had FIFA President Gianni Infantino appearing in the Saudi government video extolling the virtues of Saudi Arabia and travelling there and the food. Well, this week, FIFA have put out a piece trumpeting women's football in Saudi Arabia on their website. They've spoken to various Saudi FA officials. No mention in the piece, for instance, about the challenges still in terms of women gaining equal rights in terms of relations, in terms of divorce, as well as actually whether any LGBT players could play in that league as well. But Saudi Arabia has got this piece on the FIFA website talking about women's football taking another significant step forward with offering more encouragement for girls who want to play the sport in the kingdom.
Yeah, and Saudi will be more and more important as we've seen the impact of the pandemic on football, on the football transfer market, for example, on football clubs. FIFA have announced this week another round of the global transfer report. That's their annual report into football transfers, and the figures show that the impact of the pandemic is still ongoing. The amount spent has fallen by more than 13% from the year before to 4.86 billion. And if you look back to pre-pandemic, which is around 2019, that's a massive 33.8% from 7.35 billion. So we're talking about billions being wiped off the transfer market. This is essentially billions being wiped away from club revenues over that time as well. So you can see why they're desperate to go to wherever the money's come, whether it's crypto, whether it's Saudi or wherever.
And the Saudi cash starting to being spent by Newcastle this week with the January transfer window opening, although not the big glamorous names that many might have anticipated. That might still be to come with, well, Kieran Trippier is an England international coming from Atletico Madrid, and Chris Wood, the New Zealand striker, coming from Burnley.
The FIFA report is only international transfers, so that doesn't include, for example, Jack Grealish and Manchester City. Now, this week we've also had Manchester City releasing their annual accounts and showing that for the first time they've overtaken Manchester United in terms of revenue. So it's a sort of fairly remarkable financial year. They made a profit as well. I know they lost a lot of money last season, the season before, I should say. But yeah, in pandemic year to make a profit and to overtake Manchester United is fairly significant, I think.
We should give credit and mention to some of the Manchester City sponsors, perhaps, who helped to drive that commercial revenue. Etihad Airways, Etisalat, Visit Abu Dhabi, Expo in the UAE, many more. The Emirates Palace Hotel in Abu Dhabi as well.
Interestingly, in the Manchester City accounts, they are not stated as being related party sponsors. But I imagine under the new Premier League rules, they would be viewed as associated parties.
Yeah, do you know what? It's a remarkable journey that club has been on to surpass Manchester United in revenue. Again, I'd like to see there's some statistics in terms of its popularity across the world that's allowed City on a commercial level. We talk about the sponsorships to show that they are so popular. The commercial revenues are enormous. I think they're 271 or 276 million, something like that, for the year, which is stunning. And I think that's a great credit to their commercial department for doing that. But they also have been benefited from the broadcast contracts, and that's to do with the performance on the field. And you can't separate these two things sometimes. That commercial revenue allows you to buy the better football players that allow you to win football matches and get that broadcast income. So well done, Manchester City, for creating this system, this mechanism. And there's been no punishment yet for any wrongdoing in terms of the case at UEFA, which was eventually thrown out. And Martin, the Premier League inquiry into whether anything's been fiddled when it comes to sponsorship revenue is now entering its third year. And in that time, Manchester City have won 2 league titles and on course to win a third. And all you could say is credit to Man City for doing what they're doing. The rules are the rules. They say they're within the rules, and they're on the way.
Yeah, well, maybe another 5 years or so, we may get a result of that internal inquiry. You never know.
A new Premier League chairman this week, a temporary one, another temporary one.
Peter McCormick, who was interim Premier League chairman, taking over from Gary Hoffman at the end of the month, having been interim Premier League chairman in 2014, 2015, having been interim Premier League chairman of the FA throughout the whole of last year. So, I mean, I have to say, after the Tracy Crouch review, it does seem a sort of fairly uninspirational appointment. They could have at least had some sort of more imaginative person to take the reins, at least temporarily.
Perhaps any future candidates should have to make their case on this show. We could have a debate against potential chairs of the Premier League. I think we might be left waiting for that one. Well, we turn to the United States now, and for news of the first charges brought under the Rodchenkov Act. That's the law named after Grigory Rodchenkov, the former chemist behind Russia's state-sponsored doping program. He turned whistleblower to help to provide the evidence that ultimately led to Russia's ban from so many international sports competitions. And this is a law relating to the providing of prohibited substances. And a 41-year-old man from Texas, Eric Lira, has been charged with corrupting the Olympics by providing performance-enhancing drugs to athletes who competed in Tokyo last year. The substances include human growth hormone and blood-building hormones. And one of the athletes he's accused of helping to dope is the Nigerian sprinter, Blessing Okabera. She was once a silver medalist at the World Championships, and she tested positive in an out-of-competition test for human growth hormone just hours before she was due to compete in the 100 metres semi-final in Tokyo. We know a lot of this evidence now from the case because her phone was searched by US investigators when she returned to the US from Tokyo. They found messages in an encrypted app, and one of them from her to Lira said, "Is it safe to take a test this morning? Remember, I took it Wednesday and then again yesterday. I wasn't so sure, so I didn't take a test." There's another message that we discovered she sent from Tokyo saying, "Call me urgently. They said one of my results came up positive on HGH. I don't understand." Well, certainly an interesting case, that, and we wait to see how that prosecution does develop. And perhaps so much of the willingness for authorities to now prosecute sports corruption cases stems from the investigative journalism of this man, whose work we're going to hear from now.
I caught up with President Blatter again as he was about to fly off to the World Cup in his executive jet.
Good morning, President Blatter. Why did FIFA repay the ISL bribes? Did you ever take bribes from ISL? President Blatter, I must ask you, are you a fit and proper person to control world football? I'll ask you again, why did FIFA repay the ISL bribes? Are you a fit and proper person to run world football?
The reporter you can hear there is the voice of Andrew Jennings, who produced many Panorama documentaries over the years, probing the world of FIFA and the IOC. He died this week at the age of 78. Certainly someone who helped to bring new awareness to probing sports news in terms of taking it to a wider audience.
Yeah, Andrew was a sort of remarkable person. I mean, he'd done some great books about the IOC and the Olympics, and I first encountered him in 2001. He was basically taken on to tackle the FIFA issue, and he was a dog with a bone. He was sort of did a really good book called Foul, and absolutely sort of identified the bad guys amongst FIFA, Jack Warner, people like that, Havelange, Leoz, Texera, the whole sort of cabal. Yeah, it was a fairly sort of confrontational person, not just with the people he was targeting. He was sort of very critical about his fellow journalists. He didn't think were sort of asking the right questions, following the right stories, because he was so focused. So, not surprisingly, quite a few British journalists who felt that they more than any other country were putting the squeeze on FIFA, and Andrew Jennings was criticising them. At the same time, a remarkable guy, quite good company as well.
And some of those people you mentioned, Ricardo Teixeira, Nicolas Leoz, Jack Warner, they were members of the FIFA Executive Committee still in 2010 who voted on the 2018 and 2022 World Cups. Jack Warner, a bribe giver as found by US authorities. Ricardo Teixeira also involving bribery, as was Nicolas Leoz too, and he was banned later by FIFA. And so much stemmed from the work of Andrew Jennings, which ultimately he was approached by the US authorities in 2009 to see what he knew. They started investigating the American member of the executive committee at FIFA, Chuck Blazer. He eventually turned compliant whistleblower who helped them. He wore an undercover wire who helped to then provide evidence that prosecuted future cases. And we saw with all those arrests in 2015 at the FIFA hotel in Zurich, as well as in other locations like Miami around the world. And so many officials were arrested. And ultimately, we had Sepp Blatter being re-elected, but then announcing his departure late in the year. He was eventually pursued by the authorities as well. He was banned and prosecuted by FIFA ethics. So much did stem from the work of Andrew Jennings, and he had that really tenacious approach, approaching various FIFA officials and taking years and years to try to prove his case. And there was some resistance in even the media in England. The fact there was a panorama just days before that World Cup vote in 2010 when England were bidding for the 2018 tournament. And, the England bid team did call it an embarrassment, though Andrew Jennings was vindicated over time, and no wonder FIFA didn't want him investigating. One of the things someone like Andrew Jennings might not always recognise with groups of journalists like us, that while some days we will ask the probing questions of FIFA, the leadership, and actually their dealings, but other days we might need to report on other aspects of FIFA, and that could be as something of even things like VAR and technology that are developing in the games, and the fact we have to cover the full rounded world of FIFA.
Or any of these, all the challenge of a beat reporter, isn't it, Rob? You're on the beat daily, and that's the challenge. Obviously, asked probing questions, asked searching questions, and then move on to another story.
Andrew would never accept that because he just thought that was the actual football he wasn't interested in at all. So he lived by this motto, which he often used to say is, "Why is this lying bastard lying to me?" And that was what he lived by.
No tribute from FIFA to him at all, even though he did help to precipitate the downfall of Sepp Blatter, which brought Gianni Infantino to power. Something else that helped Gianni Infantino become president was the FIFA Reform Committee of 2015, and it was headed by Francois Carrad, a former IOC official who's died this week at the age of 83. Now, Gianni Infantino was on that same FIFA panel in 2015, and a key recommendation was to reduce the power of the FIFA presidency. But once Infantino did so unexpectedly get the top job, he ensured he did have the executive functions like Sepp Blatter and did not cede control to the General Secretary. So in many ways, one of the key recommendations of Carrad was watered down, and there was no real intervention from him to protect that key reform.
No, and also it's funny, the irony of both Carrad and Jennings passing in the same week is Carrad was someone who Andrew Jennings would frequently be doing battle with. Maybe they'll find another place to lock horns now they've left this mortal coil. There were some very famous encounters between those two men back in the day.
Yeah, Carrod was a sort of lawyer who the IOC and lots of sort of made sports bodies employed. I think the Court of Arbitration for Sport as well. So he was right in the thick of the whole sort of Swiss sports and legal business. And yeah, not surprisingly, lots of people thought he represented the establishment and was up there to fight for those sporting establishments and not actually for what many people thought were really legitimate questions about how those sports functioned.
And on Sport Unlocked, we do try and ask some of those searching questions too of sports governing bodies. And as we end episode 51 of Sport Unlocked, our condolences to the families of Andrew Jennings and Francois Carrad, who've died this week. And we thank you all for listening to this latest episode of Sport Unlocked. If you are enjoying us, we're grateful if you could hit subscribe on your pod platform and also vote for us in the news and current affairs category of the Sports Podcast Awards. The link to the voting, if you register on that, is on our Twitter site, which is @SportUnlocked. Simple handle there for you to remember. And for me, Rob Harris, for Martin Ziegler and Tarek Panja, enjoy the sports viewing in the days ahead. And we do always appreciate your feedback and you listening to us. Goodbye for now.